Welcome to Sports CTO Talks. In today's episode, we would be talking about the $6 billion tech blueprint for a world-class game, from Commonwealth Games to Olympics. In this series, we would be connecting with industry leaders from technology and sports domain. I am Ami, your guide on this journey, talking and discussing about shaping the future of sports tech industry. We will dive deep into discussions driving the industry, from cloud to AI, from cybersecurity to sustainability. If it is sports tech, we are talking about it. On today's episode, we have with us 𝗕𝗃𝗰𝗍. He is a seasoned sports industry leader and technology strategist with over 2 decades of global experience, spanning sports, consulting, and deep tech. Currently, a senior advisor with BCG and founder and CEO of Powerplay AI Sports. He has been at the forefront of shaping Indian sports ecosystem, advising on lead strategy, mega event planning, and integration of cutting-edge technologies across fan engagements, performance analytics, and digital platforms. He is a former tech leader with $200 million plus P&L responsibility at Broadcom and was part of the founding team of sports tech venture Spectacom along with Anil Kumble. Abhishek brings a rare blend of business acumen, technology depth, and on-ground sports expertise. His work sits at the intersection of sports, innovation, and scale, making him a key voice in the future of sports technology. We welcome you, Abhishek, to the episode. So, Abhishek, my first question to you is that India has won 6 medals at Paris 2024. China has won 40, US has won 40 gold medals, right? So in India, if India is genuinely, aiming for Olympics 2036, so and if you want to finish, in the top 10, like what changes or structural changes does the Indian team or the Indian sports need to do, and how can it, be taking place?
Yeah, I mean, the gap is quite wide. So US, as you said, sends about 600 odd athletes. They won 40 gold medals. China, roughly around 400, and they won 40 gold medals as well. India, if I recall correctly, sent about 110 to 120 in Paris, and we landed up winning 6 total medals. Right. So the answer is obvious that we've got to look at more depth as compared to stars, right? So we've got individual stars, a handful of them that do medal, but the depth is obviously lacking, and that begins with having and creating a very strong talent pipeline, right? So how can you identify talent at 10, 11 years old and then take them through that pipeline into playing juniors at 14, obviously then 18, and then under 21 and into an elite sort of category. So that talent pipeline, that ID for each athlete that's identified at a young age has to be there. So we need more depth as compared to stars. We obviously need a very strong talent pipeline. There has to be also a use of technology in a big way, right? And technology, I think with AI, computer vision and all, it can really do wonders for talent identification, especially at a younger age. So I think that tech integration across the sports ecosystem has to be there, all the way from grassroots to elite. The other thing I would say is, coaches also, right? So if you look at any developed sporting nation, whether it's the US, China, or Australia, for example, they have, give or take, one coach per, let's say, 8 or 10 elite athletes. In India, that number is one coach per 30 or 50, right? So that's not sustainable. So we've got to look at these 4 or 5 things, all the way from talent identification to have more depth, to use technology to make sure that coaching is more obviously elite and more consistent across different levels, to be in any shape or form, to then target winning at least, in the next Olympics, maybe doubling the count to 12, and then getting to that 40, 50 medals by 36, which is obviously the aspiration of a lot of our countrymen.
So it's a two-part question, continuing to what you were saying, like when you were talking about the pipeline. how does it work? Like, what are we doing at grassroots levels, mid levels, or government as a whole, or private companies? What are they doing? And I know how are we all aiming at one single thing, 2036? How is it working? And the second
Yeah.
part of my question is about technology. You are saying technology also needs to be integrated into sports.
Yeah.
So, India as a country, what are we doing in that also?
Yeah, so grassroots, I think, is one area that we struggle with, right? A lot of investment today in grassroots, whatever investment comes from government. I mean, there are some handful of private sector players in that area, but it's too few, right? We need a lot more. So our grassroots setup obviously is very weak, and it starts with not being able to ID the right talent at the right time, right? People that win medals, that we've seen win medals in events like the Olympics, have done it more despite the system than because of the system. And I think we've got to acknowledge that, and we've got to change that, right? So that comes in. It's got to be a joint effort between the government, between private players, between federations. Right. I think that federations play a key role in grassroots talent identification as well, and they've got to sort of pull up their socks and come to the party and make sure that we are identifying the right talent. We're nurturing that talent through their development phase, making sure they're getting international exposure, they're getting access to good coaches, they're getting not just good sort of access to technical training in terms of using high tech in performance and all, but also for recovery, nutrition, injury prediction, all of that. And that segues into your second question, that's where the technology can be leveraged, right? You use technology, computer vision, AI, machine learning, data, create a standard data stack, one standard data stack for the nation for different sports. Start with few sports, and then obviously take it to other sports as well. But that way, you can track an athlete, identify an athlete, track them, track their performance in events, and then do the right modifications, changes, adaptations that have to be done based on the data that technology is giving you. So I think it's going to take a while, but we've got time. This is the right time to start for 36. If we start in 2030, it'll be too late.
Too late, correct. So when you are talking all this, I understand that sports is a strategic decision. It's not a cultural one, right? So if we as a country want to win medals in 2036, we need to be targeting, discipline where there is competitive field, because actually beatable, it cannot happen in 10 years if we are not starting right now, according to you, right? So which sports India should be doubling down right now, and which ones we might be sure of that, yeah, in like, these are the few sports, yeah, we will win and we will go ahead.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think you've got to take a little bit of a mathematical approach to this, right? Which sports give you the highest ROI, right? And what is the ROI sort of dependent on? And it's dependent on two things. One is medal density, right? Which discipline has more medals, and what are the realistic barriers to entry, right? Because then you don't want to focus on sports that technically have really low barriers to entry. Anybody can come in, and your probability of winning goes down. So if you look at sports, India historically has been very good at shooting. Shooting has around 15 plus medals in the Olympics. It's a no-brainer, right? You've got to look at weightlifting. Wrestling has been good for India, a decent number of medals as well. Boxing, right? Badminton has been pretty strong as far as India is concerned of late, and archery, right? I think that's another good one. So I think these are probably, and athletics, specific sports in athletics like javelin and relays, where India has got a good pipeline of athletes coming up. I think those, if you look at the number of medals in each of those categories versus where India is already today, I think that to me makes a lot of sense to focus on these 8 or 9 disciplines, at least to begin with, because they have the highest medal count, and India has a good chance given where we are today with athletes in those sports. Now, you've also got to take emotion out of it, right? So hockey, for example, obviously India has done historically very well in the past. Of late, not as much, although we are probably on the way up again. But the number of medals is one, right? And you're making a lot of investment into a sport for one medal. I'm not saying don't focus on it, but if your focus is, okay, how do I maximize my medal count in the Olympics, then to me, hockey would not be a priority sport. quite honestly. Some other up-and-coming sports which have high potential for India are squash. I think that's going to be in the LA Olympics. I think Anahat Singh is doing really well. You hope that she inspires, much like Saina Nehwal and PV Sindhu did, for badminton. Hopefully, Anahat can do the same for squash, and she's doing really well on the world stage as well. We can also look at cycling and maybe rowing as well, right? Where India sort of start fencing. I forget as well, where India has sort of already begun, and they have a good chance over this next 7 to 8 years to build really world-class athletes in those sports. But yeah, I would, as I said, look at the number of medals in a category and the amount of obviously what are the barriers to entry and the investments I have to make, for making sure we can medal in that and then take that call.
Okay. So like you have been into the industry for more than 2 decades, right? So what will day one look like if we are supposed to start today, suppose, because we have like 10 years from now for the Olympics. So like today, 2030 and 2036. Like just divide and explain us how should we go ahead or how are we going ahead?
Yeah, so you've got to start, obviously, as I said, identify your target sports. If it's 12, 13 sports that we've picked, then so be it, and we focus on those 10, 11, 12 sports. And that starts with identifying talent and having infrastructure at grassroots to begin with, right? So if I'm looking at 36, I'm probably looking at maybe 11-year-old right now, potentially in that 11 to 12, 13 years old, that who will probably medal 10 years down. So I need to know who those kids are, right? And that starts with talent identification. How do I identify the right talent for the right sport? So it begins with that. Once you identify that, you put money obviously into ensuring that, as I said, they are going into a system which takes them into elite coaching. By the time they're 14, they're playing international tournaments. They should have played at least 100 international tournaments by the time the Olympics sort of comes around. That exposure has to be there. So you start with identification. You take them through the national pipeline, the national tournaments. You have CTO India. You have other events. Get them to a point where they're ready internationally. Make sure that they get the right coaching, the right physical and mental, obviously trainers as well, and that you're tracking their performance right from today till 2036. Obviously, 30 would be a good point. They'd probably be 16, 17 by then playing, and they should have made a mark in international junior competitions by then. And by 36, then they're ready to hopefully medal for the nation.
Okay. So when you were talking about this, I had a question about infrastructure. How ready are we, or how, on what lines is the government working? How is the private sector helping them? And end to end, is the public open to 2036 infrastructure level development, whatever is happening? And if you could give us that type of picture, not the brochure one, but what is going on the ground, the reality one.
Yeah, so see, let's divide infra into two pieces. One is, the infra for the games, right? Which obviously Commonwealth, Ahmedabad is one. There's a lot of development that's going to happen, and we'll touch upon that because those are massive investments that are being made, not just in sporting infra, but also the surrounding infrastructure. When I say surrounding, you have to have obviously the roads, the hotels, the airports, all travel, everything has to be in place. So there's obviously a lot of urbanization and development going on that piece. So that's going to happen because obviously we won the games. We are going to bid for 36 Olympics as well. So that investment is set and done, right? It's going to be massive, and we'll touch upon that later. In terms of sporting infrastructure today, a lot of it, as I said, is driven primarily by government, right? Unfortunately, private sector outside of cricket really has not come in, barring a few companies. Right? There are a few big ones that focus on some sports at the grassroots level, but again, as I said, they're too few and far between. So we've got to work out a system where the private industry is incentivized to invest more into sport. There was a proposal made by the Honorable Sports Minister of one corporate, one sport, which I don't think is actually bad. It's actually a good, logical proposal where a corporate or a state even picks up a sport and sort of invests in that, and the state funding can be linked to performance KPIs.
Okay.
If their athletes are doing well in that sport, they get a larger share of the national funding that is then distributed to the states, right? And obviously from a corporate perspective, you give them more tax incentives, but also look at how you can start monetizing their investment in sport. It can't just be CSR funds coming in, right? And generally the way it works is grassroots and infrastructure is handled by the government. That's their strength, and the federations. Your athlete leagues and athlete pathways are where the private sector comes in. And then you've got obviously tech integration across the entire chain, right? So you've got to come up with a system where we see IPL is very successful. PKL Kabaddi showed that
Yes.
it can be successful if it's done the right way. So there has to be an approach for other sports as well, where you look at what makes a league successful. How can you build an athlete talent pipeline, and that'll then, the unit economics of that then have to be viable for any corporate to come in and make those kinds of investments into taking the sport ahead. So I think it's got to be a joint effort. We've got to look at policy. We've got to look at a little more government proactiveness, a little more private sector inclination to invest in sports outside of cricket, figure out how other sports can be successful, which they can. I mean, there's no reason for it not to. And then go from there.
Okay. So, when you were talking about this, the infrastructure part, like stadiums can hold a huge capacity of people. So, what about, the broadcasting equipments? What does the network need to do to actually handle the density during a live event? And it can be 50,000 people, 70,000 people, so many people. It can be athletes,
Yeah.
officials, fans, it can be anybody.
Yeah.
So how does that program need to be rolled out and for a smooth functioning?
Yeah. So any mega event, look, one, it's important to understand that a 1 day IPL final does not equate to a 2 week long Olympics, right?
Correct.
Because it's a lot simpler. I would say simpler, but not that onerous to do a 1 day event. But maintaining that over 2 weeks, that quality obviously takes a lot from an infrastructure standpoint. So if you're talking about, let's say 70, 80,000 filling 80,000 people filling up a stadium, it can't be just, okay, everybody has Wi-Fi, so it's a smart stadium. That's not the answer. Right. I think today we even have difficulty accessing Wi-Fi when we go to a lot of our larger stadiums. So
Exactly.
you have to look at a combination of different technologies. Wi-Fi 6 is important. You have to have several access points within a stadium. You have to deploy small cell technology. 5G networks are fairly well rolled out across the country. So combination of a hybrid network, a private 5G network hybrid plus a Wi-Fi 6E should provide enough connectivity to to the people in the stadium from given the concurrency that is expected. Because typically at that size, when you're looking at 70, 80,000 people in a stadium, we're talking about 1 to 2 terabits per data coming out. So obviously, it's very important that you have robust network coverage. Latency is low, right? Broadcast, again, it becomes very important because you're talking 50 cameras each event. If you really want a world-class, broadcast production capability coming out. So latency, again, low latency is crucial, and having these networks and the backbone setup becomes crucially important. So I think we've got, I think, as I said, the rollout of 5G is fairly good. Indoor coverage is poor. Obviously, density is poor. So those are areas that have to be updated. And you've got to start looking at stadium as a data center, not as anything else, right? And only then can you make sure that the experience is seamless and you're achieving your objectives of a clean broadcast and good fan experience.
So when you're talking about this, that there is work needed to be done on the data front, like what type of startups are existing here in India? Sports startups, or it can be sports tech startups or anything related to sports. And how are they functioning? How is the government supporting them? Or the incubation centers, as a whole, how is that system, the startup ecosystem, growing into the sports?
Yeah, look, sports tech historically has struggled in India, right? And I can say from experience, right? I mean, the product that Anil and I built at 𝗓𝗏𝗄𝗲, I think was a little ahead of its time, to be quite honest. But really a world-class product for fan engagement and performance analytics. And God bless the companies, startups that are trying to do it. There are several, right? Before we started this, we spoke about a couple as well. So there is, I think there is commitment from passionate individuals to go and do something. We're seeing startups in sports tech and broadcast. We're seeing them in analytics, predictive analytics as well, performance analytics. You've obviously got the big companies like Hawkeye and all that are doing broadcast innovations. So there are, I mean, there are companies that are trying. Indian startups, sports startups have struggled for a variety of reasons. As I said, India is a heavily skewed market towards cricket, right? And monetization in any other sport has been challenging. That being said, I know there are incentives being put in place by the government to support startups. Hopefully, that'll lead to more entrepreneurs coming in, putting in their time and knowledge. In fact, as I said, my own new startup is looking at AI-driven applications across different sports, right? So we see potential. I think, as I said, India, there's a huge gap from a tech standpoint. So there are opportunities. You've got to come up with the right model and the right support sort of infrastructure and systems to be able to monetize and do well.
Okay. And parallelly, when we talk about TOPS is the flagship elite athlete sports support program, right? So is the selection criteria right, or is the funding adequate? Are the right sports even in that program? Are they included into that, or is it a well initiated program, or is it running on assumptions? Like, there are multiple questions related to that.
Yeah.
So if you could explain that part.
See, TOPS is a good program, right? And there's been obviously good data and sort of good results come from TOPS. But one thing to understand is TOPS does not identify elite athletes, right? It's not an identification school. Once an athlete is sort of elite, then they get into TOPS, right? So the money is good, obviously the support and all. I think it's substantial, right? Almost 98 athletes today in the main program, about 130, 140 in the development pipeline. And about 50-60 lakhs, if I recall the right number, is given per athlete. That's part of TOPS. But then the challenge is it's more of a finishing school, right? It's not a talent creation pool, and I think that's something that needs to change. How can TOPS be adapted to identifying talent athletes prior to them becoming elite, and then taking them through the stages that we discussed? I think that's one gap that we've got to figure out how to address, because otherwise you're always in a reactive mode. Once okay, the person is talented, then you take them into TOPS, and yeah, most of our medals, most as in about 60-70% of the medals that we win in Asian, Commonwealth, and Olympic Games, those winners have gone through TOPS. So obviously, there is the results are there, but as I said, rather than acting as a finishing school after the fact, we've got to be able to structure it in a way where it's incorporated all the way from an early stage, and those athletes are then taken, from junior level to elite level. So I think that becomes important. Coaching, also, as I said, in TOPS, TOPS is focused on a small number of sports. 6 or 7 sports is where you see bulk of the medals coming in. And that obviously has got to change. As we spoke about, almost 12, 13 sports that we should focus on if we're looking at the Olympics, and winning 40, 50 medals by 36, that number has to go to probably even more. So you've got to get more sports under your gamut and under your purview, and then expand that program to those sports as well.
Okay. Previously, we were talking about investment from the private sectors, like private sector is not much involved and it is shallow, frankly. So how do you build a funding ecosystem at present or in the coming next 2, 3 years, which doesn't depend almost entirely on the government? And what's the right role for a corporate sport? Or which sport should a corporate fund, franchisee models or athletes' personal training, or selecting only a few athletes and going ahead with them? So,
Yeah.
what should the pipeline be for corporates?
See, I said 85% of sports funding today in India is driven by government, and that's the reality of it. Investments from private sector again heavily skewed towards cricket because that's where they get the maximum return for their investment. As I mentioned, we've got to look at it from not just the lens of CSR. Today, up until now, a lot of the corporates that were investing only through CSR into other
Yes,
than a few, as I said, there's a few 4 or 5 big ones that invest, but
correct.
otherwise it's always been CSR, and that's typically been only 2% of the total CSR investments were given to sports, which is a very low number. So I know government is working on laws to ensure that a larger type category of investments fall under CSR. So that should hopefully encourage more investment into the sports industry across infrastructure, manufacturing, technology, and so on. But at the end of the day, if I am a private sector entity, I have to, as I said, focus on leagues and athlete pathways. Grassroots and infrastructure has to be the onus of the government primarily. And if I'm going to look at creating leagues in other sports, I have to make sure that eventually the unit economics make sense, that they're profitable, in due course, and that can happen only through a combination of different things. Obviously, you have to make a sport more viewable. You have to use technology to engage fans. You have to understand the cultural aspect of the sport. IPL. We all talk about, oh, it's great, it's a lot of money, but there's a lot of thought also that's gone into it, right? When it was set up, Lalit Modi made sure that the cultural aspect was the way it was structured, very very smoothly merged into the cultural fabric of our country.
Correct.
You had Bollywood involved. You had obviously that entertainment angle came in, and that the same thing can be done for other sports depending on what you're talking about. And that's where the fan comes at the center of it all. We've ignored fans across sports, including cricket, right? Cricket, the problem is people will go and watch no matter what, even if the stadiums aren't the cleanest or the experience isn't the greatest. They'll still go flock the stadium. So the incentive to put money into fan experience has not been that much, unfortunately. But if you look at successful leagues across the world, NFL, NBA, and all, the fan is at the center of everything. And I think now the IPL franchises over the last few years have woken up to that fact, and credit to them that they are trying to make experiences better for the fans across the board. So fan becomes a very important part of that whole ecosystem, because eventually leagues make money from what most of their money comes from: media rights,
Correct.
right? And that's going to be true for every sport. Why will a broadcaster put money into media rights when they know they've got eyeballs? How do you create eyeballs is by making sure that, as I said, you've culturally sort of touched a chord with the fan. You've made the product exciting. You've made the product competitive, high quality, and the experience of the fan is very good. So it's as I said, it's a combination of different things that have to come together. And I think private sector should look at other leagues, and I'm glad they are. Rugby's come up. We're seeing pickleball. Obviously, there's table tennis. And hopefully, you hope they'll be successful. PKL was successful for a while. I think now it's sort of gone under red again.
Yes.
But they showed, at least they gave a blueprint of how a traditional Indian sport could be so successful and make money, for the different stakeholders that were involved in it. So I don't see why it can't be done for other sports with the right private sector approach.
Absolutely. So, like, if India needs to bag 15, 20 medals, like, let's just say, so what does IOC look very carefully, or what do they monitor? It is not only about infrastructure, right? They look at the complete ecosystem. So, like, what do they look at, and what does India need to be prepared from today and not 5 years later?
Yeah, so you're right. IOC will look at a lot of things, and they look at also primarily your trajectory of medal growth. How's your pipeline under 14, under 21 elite? That's going to be monitored. So they will look at performance of Indian juniors, Indian athletes that are in those age groups and how that's progressing. And that's got to be on an upward curve. We've got to look at doubling the medal count by LA 28. Six is way too less. I mean, it's very disappointing. So hopefully if you're looking at 12, 15 medals in 28, that shows progress. Right, then you've got to get more and more world events into the country, which I think we're trying to do. We've just won the World Indoor Athletic Championships. That's going to be held in Bhubaneswar in 28. The 𝗕𝗏𝗺𝗺𝗺 Games are going to be held in Ahmedabad in 29. The Commonwealth obviously is here in 30. So that's coming in. More and more events need to come in. So they will look at that as well. And the third thing, India unfortunately ranks number one in an area we don't want to, which is doping. And so governance and the right checks and balances become very important.
Correct.
And how is that set up for the country? I think that's also an important factor that will be looked at by the IOC. In addition to, of course, how's the development and what story can Ahmedabad sell in terms of why we should win the Olympics over some of the other cities that we are competing against.
Absolutely. So, like, other than athletes, there are para-athletes, and there are 29 medals which we have won at Paris 2024, like 7 gold, which is an extraordinary effort, right?
Right.
So, yet Khelo India infrastructure for the para-athletes sports, the identification and the development is a fraction of what exists or what should be existing. So, like, how do you explain the disconnect and what needs to be done on that front?
Yeah, I think para athletics has been an inspirational story for India. I think a lot of the athletes that have won medals in the para games, it's been more, they're more inspiring stories than being a product of the system, to be quite honest. Right? They're in stories of individual resilience that have really stood out, and more power to them. Right? I think what we have to look at is there are certain things in para sports that one has to understand, that the competition depth is less as compared to a able-bodied sport, right? So typically in an able-bodied sport, you'll have a good 60 to 80 to 100 high quality athletes competing for medals across the world. Para, that number is probably 15 to 25. So the barriers to entry obviously are slightly lesser, right? That being said, it's a credit to India's, the coaches that have been with the athletes that have won, the medals, 7 gold medals and the other 22 medals for India, that they've been able to take something which rather a poor infrastructure for a para athlete in India to, world-class success. So imagine if you fix that infrastructure, if you make our venues even just more accessible and inclusive. It starts from there. You can't sort of treat it as an afterthought. I think para can be the biggest story for putting India in the top 10 sporting nations in the world, because athletes are already doing well. So but classification is a problem today. When you hold an event that mega as the Olympics, you'll obviously have more local participation. Classification becomes very, very important, and it's a big checkbox on your credibility, as a nation to be able to host those games. So we've got to look at how we're classifying, what mechanisms do we have in place to ensure the classification is done correctly. What are we doing to ensure that our para athletes have the right infra, that they're being identified again, much like an able-bodied athlete at an early age, given the sport that they would be good for and classified into, and then how are they progressing, through the years. So I think those things have to come in play. Khelo India Para is a very small, initiative, and I'm glad at least they are having the Khelo India Para Games. Hopefully that will become bigger as things progress, and we give it a more formal structure like we give other sports. But hopefully, and as I said, I think Paras probably has the potential to be the biggest single success story for the country in its push to a top 10 sporting nation.
Okay. So, like, when we are discussing about 2036, what role will CWG play, and how is that of third step, fourth step to reaching to Olympics, and how can we bag more medals, and why CWG is more important, and what everyone combining government, private, individuals, athletes, everyone as an ecosystem, what can we do different in CWG?
Yeah, so CWG is about 4 years away, right? It's not very far. I mean, I think one of the main reasons why we're hosting it is obviously to build up the potential of the city to be able to host a mega world event. Otherwise, if you see CWG is, countries are backing out, right? There's not very many bidders. Even this time we had only two,
Two.
obviously. So the economics, which is very important, does not sort of encourage countries and cities to bid for it. India obviously has other reasons, and Ahmedabad is being built, and it's part of that growth story that I think it makes sense for CWG obviously to come here. We've got to, as I said, you can't identify an athlete now and make them medal in 3-4 years, but that process has to begin. So we already know who our prospects are right now across the sports that are going to be held in the Commonwealth Games. I think a little more effort needs to go in sort of making sure that the right talent is identified, even today. But obviously, they'll not be 11, 12 years old. They'll probably be in their late teens. But again, you've got to make sure that in addition to the ones that we already know about, how do we sort of fast track some of the other high potential athletes that may not be on the radar yet? And that's where technology comes in. That's where AI comes in. And if you're able to do that, you fast track them into a scheme like TOPS, make sure that they're there, they're getting the right physical, mental training, going through, different pressure situations. It's obviously going to be a home games. Pressure is a lot higher. You expose them to that, expose them to international events, give them that experience so that when Commonwealth comes in, they're ready for that level of competition. And the world's eyes will be on Ahmedabad, not only in terms of how its athletes are doing, but also how the city is hosting the games. What kind of experience are we giving the fans, and what kind of product are we putting out there? Because it's obviously, look, the Olympic decision would have been made by then, so it's not a test, for whether we should get the Olympics or not. But it's going to be a check mark for our own assessment. Okay, where are we ready or are we not? If we won the Olympics, then are we ready to host the Olympics? Are we on the right track to 2036?
Correct. Abhishek, I still have a lot of questions, but I'll narrow it down to last two questions.
Yeah.
One feeling is that, there is a pipeline, it is being built for the 2036, definitely. But if an athlete goes on the podium, what are the three things which the whole ecosystem should keep in mind? That, yeah, the athlete has to reach the podium, the athlete is on the podium, and we have won a gold. So what will be those three things?
Three things to get to the podium, or
Yes, to get to the podium. Only three things.
So yeah, for any athlete, especially for the Olympics, and if you're looking at 36, three things that I want to see is to have a national talent ID set up, a common stack, data stack for athlete identification, for their monitoring and progress. Right? That's at the crux of it all. Then I want to see the fact that they are given the right coaching, the right tools to be able to succeed, which means access to elite coaches, not just physical, but also from a mental strength perspective. Deploy technology in recovery, in performance, in injury prevention, all of that. And third, I want to make sure that they've participated, as I mentioned, in a lot of international events, that they've got the exposure and the experience to be able to handle the pressure and the demands of an event or a mega world event. I think if we get these three things sort of sorted out, right? And yeah, you said three, but the fourth one is, I want to see the federation issues that we have sorted out in India. Today,
Yes.
as we speak, almost 14, 15 federations are in court in some form or the other, and that really needs to change. So that governance has to really tighten up, because they'll be the ones, at the end of the day, responsible for a lot of these athletes. So I think if we are able to do these three, four things, we are going to increase our chances of obviously having more athletes on the podium.
Right. And like today, everyone is talking about AI. That's the reason this is the last question, right? So, what role will AI play specifically into Indian sports, specifically into CWG, and how will all these years, add up and we will be able to reach the podium in 2036, taking the help of AI?
AI, I mean, absolutely crucial technology, and it's important that we adopt it and adopt it very quickly. It's going to be, it has to be used in conjunction with computer vision and obviously biomechanics. You combine all of that, and you're able to not only identify the right talent, you're able to, as I said, do a lot of things in terms of performance prediction, injury prevention, recovery, all of that. AI is going to be at the crux of it, and what we're able to do with that data is going to be equally important. So, obviously, from a talent ID to a performance standpoint, it becomes of supreme importance. But also in hosting the games, I think in ensuring the right fan experience. When we talk about an Olympics, you're talking about making sure that you've got 50, 60,000 athletes that are being tracked real time via RFID plus AI. You have to do crowd control that can be done via AI. Make sure that you're predicting traffic congestions, for example, well in advance. You're routing the traffic in the right direction based on the data that your AI models are giving you. Security, obviously, anomaly detection, incorporated in those smart cameras. So AI has, and obviously in fan experience as well. Right. Today, if I go into an NFL stadium, I have smart beacons at the stadium telling me where my seat is. I get personalized content on my device because they know what players I like, what sports I follow. So they'll send me, targeted merchandise offers. I can order food into where I'm sitting. They'll tell me which washroom has the least amount of crowd. So all of this is machine learning and AI and computer vision all sort of coming together, both from an athlete standpoint and both from a fan's standpoint. I think both of those have to be in place to have a really successful Olympics.
Absolutely. Abhishek, we'll move on to the next segment of the podcast. That's the rapid fire round. I'll ask you a few questions and you'll have to be quick in answering. It can be one word or max one sentence.
Sure.
Perfect. Name your all-time favorite sports person.
It's got to be Roger Federer. I mean, not only because of what he's done on the field, but also because of how he's played the game and the impact he's had. The greatest of all time.
Okay. One Indian sporting moment from the last 10 years which gave you goosebumps, even today if you talk about it.
I'll give you two. Obviously, Neeraj Chopra's gold, I think will be top of the list for everyone. But also Sindhu's performances, I think, in the World Championships and the Olympics, I think have just been mind-boggling. The way she's played in a very difficult sport. I think she's an inspiration.
Absolutely. One Indian athlete currently whom you know would win a gold in 2036 Home Olympics. Name one.
Who I know right now, it's 10 years out. So
Yes.
obviously I can't say Neeraj Chopra, but yeah, I would say Anahad Singh. Yeah, I mean, I think she's young. 10 years is a long time, but
Correct.
yeah, what she's doing right now, I think if she can sustain that, although 10 years is a long time, yeah. So
Long time.
maybe we don't even know who the athlete is yet.
Absolutely. So, like these days, biopics are huge, right?
Yeah.
So, which Indian athlete story do you think is most overdue into a film?
I would say PT Usha, very underrated. Well, and she's not got, I think, the respect that she deserves. She's been India's finest athlete. I mean, of course, Milkha Singh was there, but PT Usha is equally good. And yeah, I don't think I've seen a biopic on her yet. So maybe that's her story is due.
Okay. One sport you personally wish had more fans in India, not for medals, just because it deserves more love.
I would say wrestling. It's a
Hmm.
it's a core Indian sport, right?
Yes.
Deep rooted into our culture, but again, not very widely watched.
Hmm. True. One foreign country whose sports culture you genuinely envy and wish India would, follow it or copy it without thinking.
Oh, it's got to be Australia.
Yeah, it is
Yeah,
awesome.
Australia is absolutely top class in the systems they have. Australian Institute of Sport. I mean, really fantastic, and a lot that we can learn from.
Okay, if you had to take one last question, if you had to take one sports player, who would it be and where would you take the sports player to have dinner with you?
Uh, okay, one sports player. I'd again go back to Federer.
Okay.
I'm a big fan of his. I'd love to sit down with him. I'd probably take him to a traditional restaurant in Ahmedabad. Where we're going to host the Olympics, hopefully in 36. Uh, yeah, make him
That's
have a
an
Gujarati thali. Yeah,
true. That's an interesting answer.
yeah.
So, okay, we'll move on to the next segment. You'll have to answer only one question into 30 seconds. Like, what is the role of AI as we were discussing? We have not, talked about in detail, but the role of AI into building India ready for the Olympics.
Yeah, so AI is going to play a key role in this whole national data stack that I'm talking about. That's going to be at the backbone of this platform, and this platform has to happen uh, sooner rather than later. And it'll be what will be an ideal scenario is to see a talent identified using AI at the age of 11, uh, them going into elite training by the time they're 14, 15, where AI is deployed for their performance evaluation, performance metrics, injury prevention, and then seeing that athlete then podium in 36. I think would be the holy grail. I think, yeah, it goes without saying that AI has got to be deployed at a universal level as far as India is concerned, both from an athlete's perspective and a fan's perspective. Making smart stadiums, again, AI is going to be at the core of that.
Thank you, Abhishek, for joining us today and sharing wonderful insights and taking up all the questions. And we were able to cover so many things during the podcast.
No, I'm glad. There's good questions. I think relevant, pertinent questions. Good time to also have this discussion, as we gear up for an exciting 10 years ahead in Indian sport.
Absolutely. So, everyone, let's stay connected for more understanding on sports technology in the future. Please share this episode with all the people who love sports and technology. We will meet in the next episode next week. Until then, stay curious, stay inspired, and keep exploring.